tell me, does someone just kick off, or is there? Yeah, now I guess.
But I thought, you know what? The lineup's good. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Right.
Here we go.
Good evening, everybody. Well, welcome to the Centre for Policy Studies and CapEx Gallery here at the Conservative Party Conference. Thank you very much for joining us for the event titled From the Ground Up, Putting Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises at the Heart of Conservative Renewal. I'm Tim Dyer, I'm a research fellow at the CPS, but before I introduce the panel, I'd like to thank our supporters, Conservatives for Business, for working with us on this important topic. Our four speakers today, if I start at my right, Georgiana Bristol, CEO of the Jobs Foundation, championing the role of business as a force for good and supporting the crucial role that companies play in giving people a step up in life by providing jobs and training. And before Jobs Foundation, Georgiana led development for a range of public policy and referendum campaigns. And then we have Tina McKenzie, who is the UK Policy Chair of the Federation of Small Business and the CEO of Staffline Recruitment Ireland, one of the Northern Ireland's largest employers. Tina was awarded an MBE for her services to the economy and is a leading voice for small business, representing their interests to government and shaping policy nationally. And then we have Jimmy McLaughlin, former special advisor to Theresa May and Boris Johnson in business, technology and entrepreneurship. He was awarded an OBE for services to business and entrepreneurship and now has a very successful podcast called Jimmy's Jobs of the Future. And on my far right, Danielle Dunfield-Preyer, did I pronounce it correctly?
Great.
Good. The chair of Conservatives for Business, providing a strong voice for SMEs by rebuilding the bridges between them and the party. And she's also the CEO of the Great Sussex Way, showcasing local businesses in the Chichester district, and a former Team GB triathlete and also a former Conservative parliamentary candidate for Wimbledon. And before we get to questions for the panellists, we're going to watch a video by Conservatives for Business. So if we kick off with that first, please.
Manchester is an exciting, vibrant city. It's a great place to live, work and visit.
Manchester is famous for its culture and its sport, and it's a serious economic powerhouse. There's some of the big firms here, but today we're focusing on the small and medium-sized ones. They make up 99% of Manchester's economic community. That's over 11,000 businesses, all packing an economic punch every day. These business owners and entrepreneurs are busy people. They're running payroll, juggling staff rotas, managing their supply chains, and literally just delivering goods to their customers, all in a tough economic climate. They're flat out and often don't have time to engage with politics.
So we went to meet them, to listen, to learn what they need to survive and grow, and to celebrate their success. Their insights backed up polling we commissioned with opinion. And the message from SMEs is crystal clear. Lower energy costs, cut business taxes, slash red tape. Their biggest fears? Hikes in national insurance, income tax, and business rates. Many now spend more than half their time on admin, not growth. Just think about that. When it comes to trade, half want Europe prioritised, valuing proximity. A third are looking further afield, to the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. On net zero, opinion is split. Ambition is vital, but must be matched with realism, because it's businesses like these, not government, that drive growth. So let's back them, protect their livelihoods, and make it easier for them to dream, create, and succeed. SMEs are the beating heart of Britain's renewal. They'll rebuild a stronger economy from the ground up.
They deserve your full attention and support. Join us to give them a stronger voice.
Brilliant. So we all acknowledge that we need a stronger economy and growth, and it's businesses, not government, that delivers and drives that growth. The UK has roughly 5.5 million small and medium-sized enterprises, and they're the heart of the economy, employing over 16.5 million people, which is nearly 1 in 3 voters. So the constituency there for the Conservative Party is huge, and we shouldn't forget that. So in light of that, I'd like to ask a question for the panel, which is, how can the Conservatives ensure small business owners and employees are at the heart of policy for the next Conservative government? Let's start with Georgiana, please.
Right. I was wondering which way was going to go. Sorry. No, I mean, what an important question. I'm going to do a little plug for the Jobs Foundation, the charity that I co-founded with Matthew Elliott and I'm the CEO of. Just in that we have spent the last 2 years since we launched speaking to businesses of all shapes and sizes across the UK and connecting them to our mission, which is to champion business as a force for good in its work to support people from worklessness and poverty into jobs and training. And we now have just coming up to 1,300 members of our business council. And I think what's been obviously a huge pleasure and a privilege for me, but relating to your question, is it's going and speaking to them. It's getting out of Westminster and understanding their concerns and feeling really engaged with, the challenges that a lot of them are facing on a whole kind of range of different issues, whether it's national insurance rises, and I think particularly in terms of that issue, it's stopping them being able to take on new employees, particularly employees where it might be their sort of first job now, their first kind of step into the kind of world of work. And I think so many business leaders feel an incredible kind of pride in bringing people on and training them and giving them that opportunity. And so to have that taken away from them is obviously incredibly disappointing and demotivating. So I'd say that's a big one. Of course, minimum wage rises as well, regulation, for SMEs, it's so tough. And actually, the amount of business leaders that say to me the whole time at the moment, it's just so hard. It's so hard for us to compete with bigger businesses, particularly in terms of employment regulation and what's being asked of us. And we spend often maybe just 50% of our time having to deal with regulation rather than doing the day job and making a profit and allowing us to employ and train more people. So that's another big one. And of course, we've also got the Employment Rights Act that's coming down the track too, which obviously at Labour Party conference they re-emphasised that was going kind of full throttle ahead. And that's employment rights from day one. Again, it's very restrictive to people who are building businesses and bringing people on and being able to take risk on people. If you don't feel that you can take someone who may not have that perfect CV, because if it doesn't work out, you're going to get clobbered for it. It's really de-incentivizing. So definitely, so those are some of the issues that I'm listening to when speaking to people. And of course, look, we know that SMEs are the absolute lifeblood of our economy. They account for 99.8% of all businesses, 60% of employment. They are our ladder of opportunity, our solution to growth and prosperity. And so, they absolutely need to be front and center of any, functioning government and understanding their concerns. It is worth noting that the Jobs Foundation, we are cross-party. So when I'm going to talk about Tories, I'll be talking slightly more in my own personal capacity. But so I think it's getting out there, speaking to businesses, and absolutely injecting that into the heart of everything that the Conservatives do.
Thank you, Georgiana. Tina, what's your perspective on that question and the FSB's perspective as well?
Yeah, I think you'd have to be kind of deaf and blind not to know what the issues are for small businesses. And every MP, no matter what party, comes and tells us all of that they're the heartbeat of the economy. They know that they're the majority, as Georgie says, of businesses up and down the country. They're the majority of the GDP in the country, and they're the majority of the employment. But governments, whenever parties get into government, they still say it, but they forget about it sometimes. And I think that small businesses are sick and tired of hearing how wonderful they are and how important they are. And yet the legislation, yeah, you agree? Yeah? Then the legislation, and what I love about working with small businesses, and I started a business from scratch myself 12 years ago, and I've done quite a lot of startups, is that we tell the truth. And I was elected by the members of the Federation of Small Business, so I can say what I like. And we don't take any money from government, so I do tell them what I think. We get great access because we are the biggest business group in the UK, and the politicians are really good about opening the doors. So I think there's no point in listening to us. There's no point in repeating why you think it's so good as a party, as an MP, or as a government. But if you're not going to do stuff, and indeed not do stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that governments do that we're like, get out of our space. We don't need you to do this stuff. Let the market work. Let us get on with it. We don't need you in telling us what to do. So I think that's the first thing. I think getting stuff done, when people get into, and I worked really heavily actually with Kemi, when she was Minister of DBT, I would go and visit her monthly and we would talk about the issues, and she had a very open door policy. And Kemi was one of those people, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, who herself got very frustrated in government because she would say, this is what we need to do in DBT, we need to reduce the regulation. And she was blocked by the cabinet that she was in. It was crazy. So they would tell us a couple of things. They would either not have the support of the cabinet, or indeed you could have a situation where the civil service were running the show. And this is what's interesting. When these ministers get in, they need to realise that the civil servants, sometimes, most of whom have never run a business, have never started a business, have never put their house on the line for a business, have never raised capital, have never left their kids all day, all night because they're running a business 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And we all know what that's like if anybody out there's run their own business. So the risks and the things that you have to do to get a business up and running, and we want to because we're entrepreneurs and we like to fix things, we like to solve problems. And we're socially the type of people in the community, as Shorty says, that wants to give people a job, a hand up. The small businesses are the ones most likely to help the long-term unemployed, the disabled, people coming out of prison. It is the small businesses that do that. So I think if only they would not just listen, but they would take it on and they would do stuff, get stuff done. I'm not going to say I'm a big fan of Donald Trump at all, but one thing I've noticed about the change around the world in Western politics is the leaders are all looking at him going, oh my God, he's actually getting some stuff done. And he came in with a bunch of powers and a bunch of stuff he was going to get done. Whether you agree with him, whether you like him, I don't know. But in business, we have to get stuff done. And I think in politics, it seems very difficult for ministers to get stuff done. So I would like to see if you're back in power, if the Tories get back in again, I would like to see them not just listen, keep an open door policy, but actually they can use us to help them when the civil servants in 10 reasons why you can't do something. We've got all the research. We're a huge organisation. We can help give the 10 reasons why they can. Smart politicians use us like that. The ones who think they can do it all themselves, they're not going to get stuff done. So it's partnering, let's get stuff done, and then get out of the space where we don't need you to do stuff. That would be my kind of, that's when good policy works.
Right. Thank you, Tina. Jimmy, over to you.
Well, I think there's 5 things that's kind of like happening, which is causing a big problem for businesses, essentially, and it's stopping people employing people. You've got the national minimum wage, you've got the NICS increase, and you've got the employment rights, right? They're all government interventions. But you've also got a kind of like very sort of volatile geopolitical situation as well. And also, you have got AI that is slowly kind of moving through the system as well, and that businesses are beginning to adopt. So you've basically got 5 challenges for businesses, stopping them from employing more people. And that is a huge problem that we are facing. And I will give you like a microcosm of it. You know, we run a creative agency behind the podcast, Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, quick plug. And we were looking at hiring people over the last couple of weeks, and we've had some outstanding people apply. But when I just look at the numbers, I'm just like, I am worried about what's going to happen next year. And in the end, I don't think we're going to take any of these people on. And I think that is kind of like a real shame and a travesty that we've done that. But that is just a microcosm of what is happening across businesses all across the country at the moment, is that they do not feel confident in the economy, and so therefore they are pulling back from hiring people. In terms of what like the Conservative Party needs to do, it always kind of styles itself as the party of business, etc. And it does have a lot of former business people in it, involved much more so than the Labour Party. But sometimes that is also a bit of a challenge, because actually you don't end up with necessarily many former plumbers and electricians. And I think this is one of the biggest things that's happened in business over the last 30 years, is the kind of arc of enterprise, the arc of entrepreneurship has grown much wider. And like you've got people who are doing various side hustles, etc. And you know, tradespeople are essentially entrepreneurs in their own right. And I have to say that when you listen to Farage and Reform, like he's often talking about entrepreneurs and enterprise. And that is, it's not at the moment front and centre of what the Conservative Party are talking about, and I think that's a real challenge. That's
a great point you pick up on, is small businesses are not just startups that become next unicorns. They are the plumber, the bricklayer, the window fitter, these people.
Excuse me, can I interrupt and just say they're micro businesses? Nobody ever talks about micro businesses.
You're right. So technically, the term SME in this regard includes those micro businesses, but I appreciate, that's right. We do include them, but it does need to be said. And many of those businesses are micro businesses. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, 4 million of the 5.5 million are micro businesses.
You're right.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, but including self-employed. Yeah.
I just like to say, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And I thought it was a really interesting point when I spoke to another federation, which was Family Business UK. Mm-hmm. And they said, whenever we speak to policymakers, they are talking about those sectors, and Tim and I have talked about this as well, that are looking for double-digit growth. They don't actually need quite the same help that small and medium-sized businesses do. And what if all the small businesses, all the family businesses around the UK increased by 1% over inflation? What a big impact that would have on both our employers and our economy. So I hear you, and I absolutely, that's why we're here, that's why we set up this organisation, and that's why we are trying to give a voice to those smaller businesses with that smaller growth.
Talking about micro businesses.
Yes.
You can't just say small and medium.
Yes.
Small is from 10 employees up.
Yes.
Micro is what has to be mentioned.
Yes.
Because we're the ones that are being hit the hardest.
Yes, and actually I am a CEO of a micro business. So I have 5 employees, and we do data insights and marketing. So I absolutely hear you, and I'm with you.
I have a cafe which takes
Fantastic.
£300 a day.
Yeah.
Let's get this in perspective.
Yes.
And we employ 2 people. We are tiny. Mm-hmm. So you add on something like the employee rights bill and 120, you've got to pay sick pay.
Right.
That is 2 days profit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not more.
We will be taking Q&A. No, we will be taking Q&A. These are incredibly valid points.
Come on.
We want that passion, but everyone, please think of your questions for later. I'd love to hear, Danielle, also your thoughts on the original
Absolutely.
question for the panel, and perhaps how you draw from the community your ideas.
Great, so I am absolutely trying to address your issue, and I can hear from the gasps and moans from the audience that we have lots of business leaders here. I'm going to ask a quick question first, though, from a political perspective. If I can have a little help. Hands up who's knocked on a door, a residential door. CCHQ, might listen. A residential door, knocking to campaign. Who's knocked on a door? Okay.
To campaign.
Has, to campaign. Who has? Okay, who has knocked on a door? Brilliant, hopefully most of us. Okay, what about a business door? Who's knocked on a business door? Oh, what? There's supposed to be far less. That was supposed to be my point, and you've messed it up. Me, personally, I've knocked on thousands of doors, but how many business doors have I actually knocked on? Not many. So when I'm talking to politicians and policymakers, I say, we say that we are the party of business, but which businesses are we speaking to? And they say, well, we're the party of business. We know what businesses want. I said, well, I think we need to look at this differently. We have, as Tim's already said, 5.4 million business owners in the country. They employ 16.6 million people. That's micro. Is that micro included? I'm going to double check that.
That's the total.
That's total. Okay, good. We should be treating them as a constituency of voters. And why that's important is because I think then politicians and policymakers will spend more time looking at those issues. And I think it's two things we've got to do when we're knocking on doors, because obviously when we're knocking on residential doors, we're meeting business owners, but we're asking them residential questions. And there are two things we've got to achieve. One is go out and speak to businesses about what's important to them and what they think needs fixing. I'm finding that quite often we're using a policy item to prove that we have, to authenticate our authority to talk about the economy. That's different from listening to business, hearing what they say are the solutions. So that's the one thing I want to do. And then the second thing is feed that back to the businesses and have more of those conversations, treat them as a constituency. So we are building meaningful relationships with business. Because by feeding back what our plans are, hearing how that's really going to land on the ground, that's going to make our policies better and hopefully build some trust and deliver with a bit more passion.
Excellent, thank you. Following on from that, I'd like to hear from the panel if you have any thoughts on what a future Conservative government should cut, like regulation-wise, bureaucracy-wise, for small businesses, and also, secondly, how we're going to hold the government to their feet to the fire to ensure that it isn't just an election slogan, which goes in the manifesto, but like every other time, it ends up getting forgotten. So, love to hear your thoughts. Perhaps we start with Danielle and then we move back, if that's all right.
Right, well, I've just had a bit of a chat. Why don't you start?
Fine.
I think for me, a lot of it comes down to taxes and so on. Like in the sectors that I kind of operate in, media and creative, like actually regulations are not that sort of stringent and so on. Obviously that varies from kind of sector to sector. And I think when you're thinking about business as a constituency, you do need to sort of put some of them kind of in verticals. But I just think that the sort of, the tax that's paid is just an extraordinary amount, and it just comes at you in so many sort of different ways, and it's a real challenge. And also, and I know this is a real FSB hot button that I'm about to push, but like the sort of slow payments from businesses is like a real challenge. And it's so true as an entrepreneur. You think about your pay and salary last. Like you think about everyone else's first, and at the end of it, you're sort of there left counting kind of what's left, and you're sort of waiting on sort of thousands of pounds of kind of late payments and so on. And that ties into the admin side of it, of then having to kind of like chase it all or employ somebody to kind of do that and so on. And it's not particularly kind of meaningful work either, right? That constant sort of chasing of things. You know, businesses should be creating, researching and developing products, putting them out into the market. That's why we all sort of do it and so on. And yet a huge amount of time ends up being taken up with the admin side, which other businesses are kind of creating. And so I think that's a kind of real challenge.
I think that's a really good point, late payments. Real issue, a lot of businesses close every day because of cash flow. And actually, it's not just big businesses that are doing it to them. Local authorities, you know, the local government as well, are actually not paying on time either, even though we have these non-mandated guidelines of what best practice looks like. So I think that's a real important one. Now, apparently, the legislation is going to come out with the King's Speech next year. So we've done a lot of work on it. Apparently Labour are finally making a move on it, and I hope they are. I think when we talk to members, and our members are mostly under 10 staff in the FSP, 135,000. So if you want to talk to businesses, if you talk to us, we'll tell you what 135,000 say. Yeah. Takes 5 minutes. Energy costs is huge, huge. And it's been increasing over the last number of years. And I think this is going to be a challenge for the Conservatives, because you're only out of power a year and a half, 2 years, isn't it? This all happened on your watch as well, and so there's a wee bit of this where you have to, with the humility, say, and I think there was a lot of humility here last year, to be honest, say that we stopped listening, we got it wrong, we forgot we were the party of business. Let's be truly honest about it, because taxes increased, energy spiraled, legislation, regulation didn't drop, and it is important to businesses. A lot of businesses are being over-regulated, and they're small, and they don't have those HR departments, compliance departments, everything else. So I think energy costs is key. On top of that, business rates, and you'll know this from your cafe, yeah? Well, we argued that business rates should be reduced for the smallest businesses, including micro. Now, what's been announced here this week is interesting, because what Mel Stride has said today is that business rates are going to be wiped out for retail, leisure and hospitality. Fantastic, although, and maybe you can never keep me happy, I think I don't want Tesco's to get a reduction. I don't want Sainsbury's to get a reduction. I don't want the big pub chains to get a reduction, because they're making multi-hundred million, billion profits.
I may be wrong, but I don't think it's targeting your Tesco's and large supermarkets.
It hasn't been like. That's not what
you're right, and it's not a policy.
So I'd like it to be clear, and maybe that gets clearer as we get closer to an election. So what we would like is all small businesses, because remember, 81% of what we do in the UK today is professional services, businesses. So we want, services. So we want it across all small businesses. Let's not just say it's those 3 categories. And I think you'll see it by not doing it across the big boys. So there's business rates, there's energy, there's labour costs, which we've spoken about as well. And then I think if we could get people to pay on time, that'd be amazing. For women, particularly, access to finance. If you're a person of colour, it's even worse. So how do we get the British Business Bank, the challenger banks, outside of our big 5 banks that have kind of control of the market in a sense, traditionally, they historically hold all the cards. Well, those banks are asking people, if you go for a 25 grand loan today, they're asking them for personal guarantees. They're asking small entrepreneurs to put their houses on the line. Who's going to do that? And if you're a woman, your house might not even be in your name, which is normally what it is. Normally in a man's name, which isn't right. Well, my house is in my name, that's a different, you know what I mean? Historically, the men had their houses in their names, right? So if you're asking for a personal guarantee and the only asset you have is your house and it's a couple of 100,000, £250,000 house, are you going to put that on the line to grow a business for 25 grand? No, you're not. No one's going to. So to get this economic growth, we've also got to support some challenger banks, get more money into the British Business Bank, which is actually, and I think the Conservatives set it up, it actually is really good about getting money into the regions and getting money into places that's harder to get it into. So stopping those small entrepreneurs going to heavy credit cards, going to credit unions, get them the access to the cash they need. I think a bit riskier, but that would be fantastic.
Thank you. And Georgiana?
Well, I would just like to say I agree with pretty much all of that. I mean, I think particularly, obviously, employment regulation for SMEs is, you're just spending so much time dealing with that. I think also in terms of the national insurance hikes, and I think there is form for this, but veterans, I think if they're brought on, businesses get a kind of holiday from national insurance for up to a year, and I think that that's something that could be extended to people who are out of work. We have obviously 9 million plus people in this in the UK who are economically inactive, so I would have thought that's actually quite a reasonable thing that maybe our Chancellor might consider in her budget, which still feels very, very far away. I think your second question, though, in terms of kind of how to hold feet to the fire, and I think, again, was mentioned, but, we have heard the talk before, you know, we have heard about the value and the power of SMEs, and we've talked about politicians, you know, saying that absolutely they get it and they're gonna, you know, they're gonna help and make it better. But and yet, and it's not just this government. It's, you know, before, I think, you know, the Conservative Party does not feel like the party of business, and it has not felt like the party of business for quite some time. And I think part of that, and you know, I know this is said a lot, but and certainly not for everyone. And actually, Andrew Griffith, who was on stage just here earlier, I thought was extremely eloquent and has very much a business background. But I think it is, you know, if you haven't been in business and you haven't, you know, had that frustration of trying to open your first bank account, which is a nightmare, as you say, to, you know, breathing in a paper bag in the middle of the night because you've got X amount of employees and you have that incredible amount of responsibility and pressure on you, and you're wondering whether you might have to mortgage your house just to kind of keep it going for a bit longer, and just had that, you know, had those that kind of, you know, intensity. I think it's just really hard to kind of appreciate that. So I think before you get into kind of measures that should happen, I just think there's a real education piece for anyone in kind of you know, public policy life, and trying to really as much as possible understand kind of what kind of walking that walk really feels like. And then I think in a slightly more kind of direct way, for the Conservative Party, but for any party in power. I mean, I think all those ministers, they should be, you know, they should be meeting businesses, and I know they do to a certain extent, but all the time, all the business groups, and actually, you know, shadow ministers now, they should be, no doubt you speak to them regularly, but I think it should be absolutely mandatory that you are sitting down with, you know, business groups monthly and hearing what they have to say, and really showing that you are spending a good portion of your time doing that. I think the Conservative Party board should have X amount of SMEs on it as well, and just plugging in as much SME representation as you can kind of possibly facilitate or imagine, so that they are in the beast, they are in the machine, and so that, you know, when potentially a new government comes into power, you know, you're not just getting more promises, and then life gets tough and you don't quite get around to doing things that you kind of you should have done, but you are, you know, you really are kind of front and centre of it.
Something I often thought about is that any MP should actually have to go through the process of starting a business. Like, go to company's house, set up a bank account, realise that the company's house password isn't the one you need for HMRC, get an HMRC login, then it's a different one for corporation tax, and it's a different one if you want to hire people and have PAYE, then you've got the pension password. Like, it's endless. And if MPs actually had to do that themselves,
No expense.
and they couldn't defer it or delegate it rather to somebody else, I feel, yeah, quite no expenses. I feel that they would recognise more that the troubles that micro businesses and small businesses have to go through. And it's not just money, it's also the hassle. And it's the hassle that you have to do, spend your Sunday afternoon waiting for your submission, filing your accounts and such like. Or, alternatively, you end up paying thousands of pounds to advisors or software providers because the system is so complex. So it almost needs to be like an overhaul to rationalise the system to make it much, much simpler.
Although I mean, to us, it just seems like the simplest thing in the world, right? You think you've got a group of people around the cabinet, and I think they all have to have the business brief, okay? And something simple like saying, the procurement, the billions of pounds that you spend in your department, you must think first about the local businesses of this country. So, i.e., are you spending money? Who are you spending it with? Is it going out of the country? Could that be money spent in this country, taxed in this country as well? Because most small businesses pay their tax in this country, and I mean micros as well. So they're paying their tax here. So let's make sure that with procurement, the money we spend, we put it to these businesses who are giving so much back in our communities.
That's right. And we've done some research at CPS, speaking to businesses along with Conservatives for Business. And we're hearing very similar feedback where they've come up with an idea, a product, they've sold it to an NHS trust, they've used it, it's brilliant. You know, central government says, well, that's wonderful, we're going to deploy it across the whole of the NHS. And then they turn around to a foreign company and get them to do the whole thing because they say the British company is too small. You know, so that's a procurement issue which ends up ruining British businesses who've gone and put that risk capital and had success and come up with a great idea. Danielle, do you have examples?
Right to reply for the Conservative Party. Yeah. well, at least wave the blue flag. I mean, the polling we did with Opinion showed, and this was polling SMEs across the country, and I'm sure it's really just summarised exactly what you've said already, which is businesses' biggest challenges are their energy costs are too high, business rates are too high, and they have too much red tape. So I don't know if you noticed, but one of the really outstanding comments from the video was that 35% of SMEs spend more than 50% of their time doing red tape and admin. Now, the challenge, what does that mean? That means they're not selling. And one of the things I don't understand is when we are having discussions about growth, nobody talks about sales. And sales is what generates profit. And it seems to be like a bit of a grubby word that isn't spoken about in political circles, but we've got to talk about sales. All of these things are helping us increase our sales and our profitability. So I just have one point to make, which is I used to work for a consulting firm helping small and medium-sized businesses export abroad. And I heard a minister say, SMEs don't export. And that is why I'm now standing for Parliament.
Good for you.
So I really recommend, all of you business people out there, get involved with the political system, because that is how we're going to be better. That's how the Conservatives have the edge, but we can be even better. So please, any of you have started businesses and know how to help the economy grow locally and nationally, get involved at
and
local.
to keep the pressure on.
Yeah.
Keep the pressure on the Conservative Party.
Absolutely.
So that they don't take small, medium, micro businesses for granted.
Yeah.
So, right, I think we'll probably turn now to the audience Q&A. So, wow, that one went up very quickly. So, right, okay, you. Right, the first question in the front here, please. Thank you.
So I founded a language services business in my 30s. It's now run by my daughter and son-in-law. My son-in-law sadly defected to Reform, but because he said
We'll win him back.
Yeah,
We'll win him
but
back.
I do.
We've got time.
I'm having a conversation with him all the time on my phone. So, and we're a family business with about a staff of 25. So we're a small business. I just wanted to say all the things you said were absolutely right. AI, for example, for us is a big threat. High energy costs. We have to employ HR consultants to deal with all the staff issues. We don't have the skilled staff. We haven't heard anything about the skills. For example, we can't get linguists now who go from one native language into English. They're just non-existent. There is no decent business support. The business support out there for it's creating what I would like to see the Conservative Party do, is create the right sort of infrastructure for small businesses. It's not the nitty-gritty, we deal with that, but it's making sure that there is good business support. And, over the years, I've been here for a long time, it's very, very poor. There are all these different funds, local authority has got a fund to support businesses, the Chamber of Commerce has, the FSB, everyone's got little pots, but for a business person to have the time to explore that is just so difficult.
Would anyone like to come back on that?
We've lobbied this for a long time. An easy fix to that is America does this very well. The Small Business Administration, where the government has set up the small, and in there you can find out where all the pots of money are. You can find out where you can get your loans if you're particularly these types of businesses, and it works so well. We've been telling the government
Can
to
I
go
just
for
make
that.
Can I just make one other point? In my late 60s, I went off to do a PhD at Aston Business School on later life entrepreneurship. And this is, again, something, there's a lot of people out there with huge age capital, the skills and experience, and these people need help to set up businesses. And one of the biggest barriers is what you said, is getting funding. If you've spent all your life working to pay off the mortgage, you're not going to sort of put your house as collateral. So again, it's educating the banks and financial institutions, working with them closely to say, and this demographic, I think, is very often forgotten.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. No. Right, this gentleman here next. Right. That's perfect.
Angus Allen, Colchester. I used to have a business that made desserts, so I empathise with a lot of what's been said. My point is about the opportunities of only having 120 MPs. It means that we have to select over 500 candidates. Could we possibly steer away from PPEs from Oxbridge, SPADs, people
Surely
who've only
not.
ever worked in public affairs? Could we have some normal people for a change?
You might be onto something there. Right, there's a gentleman right at the back, please. Thank you. Sorry, just if you wait for the microphone, and when you take the microphone, if you can introduce yourself and any affiliation if you have one.
My name's Charles Heslop, and I chaired the conference here over 12 years ago, and I had the opportunity to do it because one of the family businesses was sold. One of the problems we had running a family business was staff, mainly because they all knew their rights. And the other problem with businesses today, especially smaller businesses, because you're talking about retail, I can't believe that in a local shop I saw somebody buy one banana and they put it on their credit card. And most shops prefer cash because then they're not paying the banks. And I do think if the Conservative government, when they get in again, you should really emphasise for people to shop local, for people to use cash. And also, I think the time has come, because I run 2 investment companies from home, and I see all through the day white vans coming along. My next door neighbour even had a pack of Christmas cards dropped off by Amazon. Perhaps the time has come where there should be a 2% tax on sales online, and that would support the high streets, because all around the country where I go campaigning, especially in the northeast of England, you see town after town and all the shops are closed. All the businesses have gone because everything is done online, and that's the biggest threat to businesses.
Right, would any of the panellists particularly like to come back on that point? No,
Well, I was just going to say that, again, the polling that we did with Opinion said 1 in 4 small businesses are unsure if they're going to survive the next year. And so that's 1 in 4 independent shops on the high street. That's a frightening statistic. And also you mentioned family businesses. When we spoke to Family Business UK, they said that almost among their members, almost unanimously, they are investing in tax planning rather than investing in growth. So, we just have to lower those taxes and get out of the way, as Tina said.
Yeah, I think the credit card terminals is a really good point. A lot of small businesses will say, I'd rather have the cash because they're taking such a slice of my profit just to even process the transaction. I don't think the answer to that is going to be encourage everybody to use cash, because just in the world today, especially with the demographics, the younger people, they're not using cash. It's just not a thing to them anymore. They're revoluting and they're doing this, that and the other. There's a huge opportunity for government there to get into that space, and actually, with the British Bank and small businesses, that they won't have a charge, that, and that money and any profit making go back into, back into giving back to the vulnerable people, the NHS or whatever, So there's opportunities for government there to take away some cost, but also to hold some things themselves. And then just on the 2% tax on online, I like it. I really like it. The only challenge is that today what we see with small businesses is a lot of them are backing up their retail, their bricks and mortar, with an online offering as well, and we don't want to hit them twice. But I think there's something, if you can identify size and scale and say the big boys have to pay that, and those that are small, they don't. So you could do what we call a SAMBIT test, and on all legislation and policy, it should be a small and medium business impact assessment before you roll something out.
Can I just come back on your point about kind of age capital and certainly what I've seen at the Jobs Foundation and the recent report we did on Ladders of Opportunity and looking at older people and supporting them into work is, there are a lot less schemes on older people, and I think underneath that there is a certain amount of ageism that goes on, frankly, and I think that it's really, really sad because, over 50s is a huge part of the workforce. And actually, when you think about AI, I feel that, my rather minimal knowledge, I'm not going to profess to be an expert here, but one of the values that you kind of add to AI is if you have the knowledge and the questions that you're asking, that's actually what makes it a really useful tool. So I would have thought that there is a huge opportunity for older workers. And I think just generally speaking, we need to just recognise life experience and that being a really good thing. So definitely more to do on that. To your point about getting normal people into politics, certainly, absolutely, and business experience rather than an A-list, we should have a B-list. B for business. People have had some kind of business knowledge and background would be wonderful. In my next point on my note, I've just written banana, but I actually thought when you started to talk that you were going to say someone had stolen a single banana because we have so much shoplifting. But I agree. I think sadly cash and rather I think ridiculously used through kind of COVID to get rid of cash. But I do think it's hard to go back to cash in the way that it was, which drives me mad because my kids' school was endlessly saying, please bring £3 in today for Mental Health Day. And I never have £3.
Well, there's a good question. How many people actually have cash on them right now?
Oh.
Like maybe 25%? It just shows you, just people aren't carrying it.
I thought it was more than I...
Right, let's take another question. The gentleman with the glasses in the middle, and then if we take a question, if you can try and keep them as questions and try and keep them relatively brief, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
We've spoken a lot about the need to get ministers thinking more about small business. I worry, though, that the sort of disconnect is between small businesses and the civil service and those who work in government departments. These are becoming two increasingly different groups of people, one who've chosen a kind of entrepreneur business road, the other who've chosen to work in the public sector. Their interests are becoming very different, particularly, for instance, in the area of pensions, one with with defined benefit pensions, the other trying to pay into defined contribution schemes, the one frustrated by the other, and perhaps the other, rather suspicious, it feels sometimes, of, the small business sector and those who work in it. And I feel that that's the divide that we need to really bridge. We've sometimes at the top of government, we need to get more business people into the public sector, but it only really happens in a small number of senior roles. And I just wonder what the panel think about how we bridge that divide. I don't think it's actually a problem with ministers. I think it's a problem with the civil service.
I think it's a cultural thing, right? And I think particularly when you compare us to the States, the kind of like entrepreneurship, enterprise, American dream, all that stuff, it makes up much more of the fabric of kind of life. And I think that's also something for businesses, right? Like we can too often sort of ask about like government and what government's going to do, etc. But I do think it's important on businesses to kind of get out and make that sort of case. One of the examples I give of this is the Today programme. It's 3 hours long. It has about 9 minutes dedicated to business. That is not, there is no money to spend without businesses creating jobs and paying the taxes, etc. And that needs to be kind of like said again and again. And it needs to become much more of our kind of like cultural fabric, I think. And it requires business leaders to kind of get out there. And I think partly the modern world with communications, etc., is that businesses have become quite risk averse, particularly the kind of like public footsie ones, of saying something wrong, etc., not wanting to kind of like become the story. But actually we need to be encouraging more businesses to kind of get out there, get on the airwaves and explain what happens when starting a business, the taxes that are paid that people do not see, right? That's the challenge with Nick's, is that the everyday people aren't seeing it. And it's absolutely required for businesses to kind of get out there and explain these stories and make that case and make the culture of enterprise much more of the part of the fabric of our country.
And I think that story piece is really important because often, again, little bit I've done on the policy side, you will end up with a to-do list from a federation without the stories behind it. And it makes it much easier to address the problem if you understand those stories.
But I think, I agree, you have to bring it to life for people. And I think it might be nice in number 10 if a small business was invited in every single Friday for the whole term the government's there, and you still wouldn't get through. Celebrate it, tell the story. Why were they successful? What was their backstory? What happened in their life that made them an entrepreneur? How did they become so resilient? Why did they not go down the academic route or into the civil service? And telling that story for the young kids over the dinner table as well as to why entrepreneurship is so important and getting it into the schools for the teachers. So there's lots of work to be done around that cultural piece. But, I think to the civil service, I'm hoping that AI reduces the civil service. That's what I'm hoping, and therefore reduces
So you're
the
alone
cost.
here.
I know that on average, small businesses spend 4 days a year, 5 days a year, completing their forms and their returns for HMRC. That should be something that can be sped up through AI, and so I think there's a huge opportunity with AI for us to get slicker and make things easier for businesses as well.
The civil service have an AI, by the way, and it's called Humphrey.
Yeah, that's typical. Did Humphrey go to Eton?
You got the microphone.
I lead on slightly from that, in that over the last 2 days, I've seen things done by Resolution Foundation,
Yes.
and also this morning there was another one that was in here talking about the impact of small businesses, and they both said there is too much of a gap between what the self-employed pay and the employees pay, so therefore they should be increasing the tax on the self-employed. And they went through all this. They were talking about reducing the VAT threshold to 0, and they said that there is no difference between a small business and a large business. And these are the people that are advising government.
They haven't got
Yeah, and
that.
they've
that
never
is
worked in
scary.
the business or started one
And
themselves.
not one of them has ever
Run a
worked in
business,
business.
yeah.
They're all these things. So we've got the quangos that are providing information.
Yeah.
I went to see the Minimum Wage Commission to talk about them. They had not spoken to a single micro business. In fact, they said, we haven't. I said, you haven't even spoken to a small business. He said, yes, we have. We've spoken to the Federation of Small Businesses. Not one individual company. They do not include self-employed wages in the figures, because that's not a wage. That's what you just get left. That's what they told me today. We do not include self-employed figures in the median wage because it's not really a wage. Well, what the hell do you think we live off? So that is one point. And the other one is, one of the things that's frustrating for me is there's no 14-day cool-off period if you get into a new contract. Gas and electricity are the worst, and so are bin companies. They sign you up, and then you have a bin emptied, and then they say it's overweight. Can you send me the weight? No, that in our terms and conditions, it says I don't have to. There are no unfair business contracts.
I sat with grand chaps many a time having that exact conversation, that the self-employed, the micro businesses are more like domestic users and should have that cooling off period as well. But something for you to be aware of that may help you just, with the size of your businesses, there's a thing called the employer allowance. So and I had the conversation with Chancellor face to face 3 times before the budget last year to push that. And a lot of people don't even know about it. This year, I'm having those same conversations to double it. So that is where you'll get an allowance and you won't be caught into national insurance at all. So 895,000 businesses got out of national insurance because we knew it was hiking up last year. And that was an FSB ask. And so we're going to try and get that at least increased, but I'm pushing for, I don't know if we'll get double, because I fear that we are going to have other taxes or increased taxes. But if we can protect and get as many businesses out of national insurance as possible, at least that helps to protect your labour costs. So keep an eye on that one. Yeah, it's going up.
Right, we've got a few minutes left, so I'll take 2 questions at once first. Right, a gentleman in the far corner with the glasses, and gentleman here just on the end.
Thank you.
I can take you as well.
Ashton Carl, I can speak on behalf of an industry that's 80% SME, and every person in this room relies on, the Road Haulage Association. But too often we're just seen as the means to an end, just how stuff gets around, not as an industry into itself. We call it freight blindness. We see it in all levels of government. They just don't even think about how to support the industry. It just kind of happens. But we're seeing 500 haulage businesses go out of business every year. So yeah, we need to we need that increased focus. How do we get that focus on the industry that keeps all the other industries moving? And a special plug on the things we need, which are skills, drivers and mainly mechanics, and also help on this road to net zero. We've got businesses coming to us asking what fuel for trucks, for the next generation of trucks do we have to buy? And we say, we can't tell you at the moment because you need to make your mind up. Everybody needs to make their mind up.
Right, we're going to take the question down the front from the lady as well, and then final question from the gentleman here just in. And then if we answer the questions, you give the closing remarks.
It's Lynn Jacobs from Bath. I just wanted to take Danielle's point up, which I think is really interesting in this room, when you're campaigning on a residential doorstep, there is absolutely no reason why you can't raise a business issue. Every person you speak to is a shopper. Every person you speak to will have some comment about what's going on in their town or village. It gives us a window to then talk about Conservatives and business.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing it, we're missing out an opportunity. So I welcome comments.
Excellent, good point.
And gentlemen.
Hello, I'm Indrahang Lingden. I'm a small business owner. And my business, the staff cost normally is around 30 to 40%. And I know that we have a duty to top up the pension. We do like pay for employer liability insurance and everything. But I don't understand the NI thing, you know. Whilst the employee pay NI, why are employers paying NI? And on top of that, right now, the employer NI threshold has gone down, right? That means we are paying NI, whilst the employees already are paying their NI. So I don't understand that. Yeah.
I don't think you're alone. Right, let's take closing remarks from the panel, please. Right, let's start with you, Danielle.
Okay, closing remarks. Well, look, thank you very much for raising logistics. It's incredibly important. I know it's a small margin business covering an enormous number of miles every week, and it keeps everything running, and it is forgotten. But that's why we have discussions like this, and Tim and I really fought to make sure that SMEs had a special discussion today, because the differences and challenges that SMEs face are different from large business, and they're more acute. So thank you very much for coming today and telling us your stories. And we, Conservatives for Business absolutely commit to keep making sure that we educate politicians and that your stories are told.
Jimmy.
Yeah, I no longer speak for the government, but I would just like to say thank you to everyone that is in this room making this case. I think it's really important that businesses do make the case and go and speak to politicians, etc. You are running a business, yet you are here on a Monday and a Tuesday kind of making the case. It's really important. We need more businesses doing that. But thank you for taking the risk and getting out there and making the arguments for business, but also just running that business on a daily basis. It's so important, and we need to make the case nationally as well.
If I were the best friend of the Conservative Party, because we're non-partisan, of course, I just came back from Labour last week. 2 weeks before that, I was at Reform. Nigel Farage has asked me for a one-to-one. As I said, we're the largest business group. We speak for hundreds of thousands of businesses. I met with Richard Tyson a one-to-one. I've not had a one-to-one with any of your shadow ministers here today. So if you want to talk to business, you'd be talking to FSB, it's the biggest. You're going to catch that audience, you're going to catch that voter audience. And I'm not just saying this about the FSB, I'm talking about the Road Freight Association and those other trade groups. They need to be actively going to us, not the other way around. Now don't worry, I did speak to them because I chased them, so it's my fault. So I would say push your ministers to talk to the people they need to talk to. But secondly, communication has to be clear. And the reason they're listening to Nigel and co is that they're speaking very clearly. Speaking a language that people understand on the ground. It's not that difficult. And I think the more business people you do get in, the easier it's going to be for you. You've got a huge opportunity with 400 potential candidates coming along. Conservatives always were the party of business. Business, I don't know, but business does feel a wee bit like you forgot about us. So, but I think it's easy to pick that up again. You can pick it up. You always do. You always do. But you've got to encourage those shadow people to speak in a clear, concise way. That's what Reform do very well to our members.
Thanks. And Georgia.
Just to pick up on the question at the gentleman in the back of the room. I mean, I think the high energy cost in this country is just kind of strangling us, and it's insane, and it needs to be seriously looked at. I also think that it's a great example, to your second kind of point, that if business doesn't know what's coming down the track and there are changes, how do you respond to that? So it's just a complete nightmare. And so how important that continuity is. I'm going to read a really, really short, fear not, note that a member of the Jobs Foundation Business Council sent me when I said I was speaking in this panel, and he said he wanted to share some comments, and I just think it's really to the point. He said, What businesses want is a government which understands the challenges and opportunities, supports growth, creates stability and affordable borrowing, has a long-term fiscal policy, reduces regulation, simplifies taxation, makes the apprenticeship levy easier to access, has a sensible and affordable energy policy. The one part that has the heritage and the people to make this happen is the Conservative Party. I really hope they engage and listen carefully to their natural voter base and start to position themselves as the party of business. As you know, I am a true blue Tory, but I'm disappointed that they are so disconnected from business at the moment. They need to start to behave as a true opposition party and champion private business for the benefit it delivers to the whole country and to unashamedly celebrate the wealth creators. Hear, hear.
Right. I would like to thank a few thank yous actually. Firstly to Conservatives for Business for supporting us in this project and panel. Also to the speakers, but also to those people here today who founded businesses or run businesses, because you are the people who are paying for all the public services which we all enjoy. And I think that's often forgotten. So a round of applause for everyone here. Thank you very much. Right, we have an event tomorrow morning at 8:30. What does a proper plan for immigration look like? Don't miss it. Thank you very much. Drinks are now being served at the back. Thank you.
Maybe it came off that.